Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are going to create this really cool HUD animation inside Hitfilm Express. So let's get started. We are going to create a new composite shot, so Control Shift and create a new composite shot. I'm going to rename this to main. Duration 10 seconds long, 1920 by 1080, 60 fps, and click on OK. So this comp will be animating our HUD. So let's create a new composite shot, and I'm going to call this HUD. This is where we'll be creating our HUD. Again, the same duration, but this time I'm going to set the width to 1000 and height to 1000, 60 fps, and click on OK. So we're going to start off by creating a new plane layer. We are going to rename this to circle. Going to set the color to white and click on OK. Then in the effects, we are going to search for polar warp and apply it on this layer. Expand the polar warp and change the end radius and the start radius as well. So we're going to create a shape that looks something like this. Then we're going to create a rotation and range keyframes. Set the range to 0 at the beginning, then move forward 1 second and 20 frames. Set the rotation to 180 and range to 180. Select all the keyframes, come the keyframes to manual bezier, then go into value graph. Hold the shift key on the keyboard and drag the handle all the way to the left. Do the same thing with the range keyframes. So now if we take a look at our animation, it looks something like this. So now we are going to duplicate this layer, Control D to duplicate it, and we will go to polar warp again, and this time we want to again just change the end radius and start radius. Make a shape that looks something like this. Make it a bit more thinner than the previous circle. Control D to duplicate it, and just basically repeat the process. I'll change the shape and create it something like this. Duplicate it again. I'm going to go to effects, polar warp, end radius, and start radius. Going to make it small like that. Okay, so if we take a look, you can see that all these shapes are animating from this position, but I want to create some randomness in this. So I'll search for rotation. Under transform, you see the rotation, so we'll change that. So let's just change this to something like 36. Just random value, just play around. Let me maybe set this to -42, this one to 72, or maybe this one I'll just, let's say -95. Let's clear up the field. And now if we take a look, it's going to animate something like that. It's really simple but looks complex. After that, we'll just duplicate circle 4. Again, Control D to duplicate it. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncheck the polar warp. I'm going to go to transform and right click on rotation and click on reset. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for an effect called grid and apply it on this layer. Let's make sure the grid is on top of the polar warp effect. So basically what I'm looking for is to create a dashed circle around this shape. So now with the selection tool, you can just remove all these horizontal lines and this one as well. Now you're left with these vertical ones. And now we can go inside grid. Go inside the grid and click on the invert option. Now we can enable the polar warp, and in the polar warp, let's just do this in the controls tab right here. We are going to increase the end radius and the start radius, and we just want to create a really thin kind of dashed circles around the shape. Now we go to grid, feather, and we turn this off completely, and we can also play with the radius of the border. If you want to do that, you can play with that as well. So let's just use 20, and there we have it. So now as you can see, it's animating. Now what I want to do is let's just first of all create one more copy of this circle 6 and go to effects. Under grid, I want to uncheck the invert option, and maybe I'll set the border back to 5. And now I want to go to polar warp and just turn down the values I'm going to start it right from this edge and just increase the, or maybe decrease the start radius, and just basically connect these two together. And if we go back to polar warp, the grid, so we can set the border radius to 1, and you can see we get these lines in our HUD, and that looks really cool in my opinion. So basically you can just play around with these widgets on screen, and try to add more lines if you want to do that, but I'm just gonna leave it as it is. So let's just continue with duplicating this layer. Control D, circle 7, and again go to polar warp. Just turn down the size of the polar warp, something like that. Make sure that it is in between these two shapes, something like that. And now if we go to grid, we can increase the border radius. So maybe I'll just create a shape that looks something like this. So that's it. We have this nice cool HUD, but as you can see, they are all animating in just one direction, which is it's gonna animate clockwise. But I want few of these circle shapes to animate anti-clockwise. So I can select maybe, let's see, the outermost ring, the dash circle, and I can go to polar warp, and on the second keyframe I'll just put a negative symbol in front of this number right here. And also in the same layer, I'm going to create a keyframe for rotation and move to the end, and I'll just rotate it in the left to maybe we don't want to rotate this too much, maybe -30. And now it's gonna continue animating for the entire duration of this composite shot, which is 10 seconds long. So that's cool. Then I want to animate these lines right here. So let's see that it is this layer. So I'll just go to transform and create a rotation keyframe, move to the end, and just rotate this to the right by about 70 or 75 maybe. And again, it's going to animate for the entire length of this composite shot. So let's go to circle 7, which is this layer right here. We can toggle that on and off to see which layer is what. So let's go to grid, and on the the polar warp, double click on the second keyframe, again enter a negative sign in front, and then go to transform of this layer, set up a rotation keyframe at the first frame, move to the end, and let's move it all the way to the left. Maybe by we'll just rotate this by about -120 or 125. So what I basically want is I want the innermost ring to animate quickly and the outermost to animate very slow. So if we play this, this is what we have created so far. So I'm satisfied with this. Now the next step is to apply the fill color effect. So let's apply it on, I'm going to use this shape. I'm going to apply it on this shape. So let's just toggle that on and off. So it's a circle 3. So apply it on this layer, expand the fill color, set the blend amount to 100%, and I'm going to change the color to this red, light tone of red. And I'm going to copy the fill color and apply it on maybe on this, the innermost ring, which is the circle 4. Control V to apply it and change its color to a lighter shade of blue, like that. We can then jump to our main comp. Let's go to the media tab, and I want to drag in my HUD inside the media, inside the main comp. I want to create a new plane layer and call this BG for background. Set this color to black and click on OK. Make sure the background layer is under the HUD layer, and in the effects we are going to search for the gradient, the color gradient effect, and apply it on this layer. Now again, I'm going to move this point to the top right corner and this point in the bottom left corner. So let's go to controls of color gradient, set the opacity to 100, ramp scatter to 100%, and the blend should be normal. Then we will set the start color to purple. Let's select a darker shade of purple, click on OK, and the end color I'm gonna set that to black. So you see we get this nice gradient, looks kind of illuminated from the top right corner. Alright, so we will just duplicate this background layer, rename this to grid, and I'm going to remove the color gradient effect from this layer. Now I'm going to search for the grid effect and apply it on this layer. So with the grid, I'm going to go inside that effect. I'm going to set the border radius to 1, and I kind of already like this grid, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. But if you want some more of these grids, more of these square boxes, you can basically change the values right here. So maybe I can go with -50 on both of these and 50 with these two as well, like that. Okay, so we have that, and now I'm going to convert these layers, the HUD and the grid layer, to 3D. Select the layers and click on this icon, then from the list select 3D plane, and now it's going to ask you to create a camera. Allow it to do so. Then I'm going to create a new point layer, and I'll call this controller, and I'm going to parent the camera layer to the controller layer. So now the changes that we make to the controller layer will also apply to the HUD and the grid as well. Make sure the controller layer, the point layer, is also 3D. Right, so let's also turn off the floor plane. We don't want that to be visible. So in the controller, let's animate it. So I'm gonna play this animation, and maybe at 2 seconds, let's create a X, Y, and Z keyframe for rotation, and I'm gonna move forward to maybe 3 seconds and 20 frames, and I want to create a different kind of angle. So let's just play around with the rotation X, the rotation Y, and rotation Z as well. Okay, so try to get a nice angle in this, maybe something like that. Looks good. So then I'm gonna select all the keyframes, convert the keyframes to manual Bezier. Then I'm going to go to value graph, select the second handle, this keyframe of the handle of the second keyframe, or the shift key on the keyboard, and just drag it all the way to the left. Do the same thing with rotation Y and rotation Z as well. So now if you play this animation, it's going to do something like that. But as you can see, our grid is getting cropped up. So to fix this, we can actually increase the scale, but that will not look good. It will also mess up our grid animation, the size of the boxes. So what we'll do is we'll just right click on the grid and click on make composite shot. We're gonna select the current timeline and move with layer option, and we can also rename this if you want to, but I'm just gonna leave it as it is and click on OK. Now I'm gonna go to settings, just click on that, and from the template I'll just choose 4K UHD 60 FPS. Basically I'm increasing the size of this comp. Click on OK, and the grid, as you can see, it's tiny, so I can just right click on the grid layer and click on transform and select the fit to frame option. So now let's just jump back to the main comp, make sure the grid comp is 3D. So as you can see, it's still getting cropped up, but we can fix that by going to transform and changing these the position values. So maybe I'll just put it somewhere over there. We can also try to increase the size a bit, like that. And as you can see, while I'm doing this, I'm not increasing the Z value of the position, only the X and the Y. So just make sure that you don't mess up with the Z position. otherwise it's gonna make your animation look ugly. So let's just keep on playing with this. Let's maybe increase this a bit more, move it around maybe a bit more. I'm trying to fill in this top right corner right here. Okay, looks good to me. So if we now play this animation, our grid is has lost the size of those boxes. So what we can do is we can jump back to the grid comp, and we can increase the size of the grid, or we can like maybe we should have already done this, but we can just cut the grid from this, cut the grid effect from this. Basically what I did is right click and click on cut, Control X. I'm gonna paste it on this layer. Okay, now I can make changes to the grid right here. I don't need to go back to the grid comp. So again, with this controller I can increase, change the size of these grids. So I'm trying to get that look back. Okay, so we have something like that. Just don't worry about these this grid not being perfect. We don't want it to be perfect, so let's just use that. So you see we have this nice kind of animation. The grid is having this transition, getting flatly laid out on this floor. So that is what I am looking for. So once you are done with that, then we can just move this. Let's move this HUD to the top. I can just duplicate this HUD, Control D to duplicate it, and I'm going to go to transform and just scale this down to around 70% or 75, and let's see, maybe add 3 second or 3 second and 20 frames, right? Because that is where we created our camera, the controller keyframe. So I'm gonna create a keyframe for position, and I'm gonna move forward to maybe 4 second or maybe 4 second and 20 frames, and then I'm gonna move the Z position up like that. Okay, maybe somewhere over there. And I'm gonna select the keyframes, convert the keyframes to manual Bezier, then jump to value graph. Then I'm gonna hold the shift key and just drag the handle to the left. So if you take a look at this, I had this HUD animation popping out, so that looks really nice. I'm gonna duplicate this one more time, go to transform and just scale this down maybe around 50 or 55. So still have that HUD, and on the second keyframe I'll just move it to the top like that. So you see we have that kind of animation. Now if we go back to the very first frame, you can see our HUDs, all these three layers are animating quite similarly. So again, we apply the same trick. I will just search for rotation, or we can just go inside the HUD tree transform and just change the rotation Z, make this 54. On the HUD 2 I'll just make this, on the Z make this negative maybe 33, and let's just keep the HUD as it is. So now it's going to animate from different point and just continue animating. Okay, so far so good. Then what I'm going to do is we'll just apply some cherry on the cake. So let's create a new grade layer, and I'm going to search for, let's just rename this grade layer to shake, and in the effects we're going to search for the shake effect under grunge, apply it on this layer, and let's go to shake, and I'm going to set the speed to around 0.45, amount to maybe around 25, set the smoothness to 100, and let's go to motion blur. If you want motion blur, you can set this to comp settings, but I just want it to be off. Then on the wrap, if I play this animation, you may not see it, or you may. Let me just show you if I can just show you that part. You can see this is what the wrap does. So basically, if it's set to reflect right now, if I set that to no on both the X and the Y, we'll get this empty space on our border, and we don't want that. So this is another prime example right here. It's going to cut our animation at the edges, so we can just fix that by simply increasing the scale amount to around 1.08, and that will just fix that for you. So you see we have this cool shake going on, and then we can also apply create a new grade layer and call this glow, and in the effects we are going to search for glow effect and apply it on this layer. Go to glow and set the blend to add, and then we are going to change the radius. So let's just increase that to around 300, and threshold to around 90, and intensity we set that to 1. So if we uncheck the glow, so this is before and this is after. So yeah, there we have our animation with the glow on. You can also create another grade layer and use some color corrections on this, but let's just not do that right now. Also, I will one last thing that I almost forgot. Let's select the camera layer and then go to layer properties, turn on the depth of field, which this is a really important step, and it will just make your animation much better. And then let's go to the lens. I'm going to increase the aperture to the maximum value, which is 1000, and yeah, that's basically it. We can maybe not 1000, let's just try to play with this with this value. I think 1000 looks fine. So if we go back to the very first frame, let's make sure we don't have any kind of blur on this. So you see there is really little to no amount of blur, and then if we play this animation, you can see we have this really nice depth of field added in our animation. You can see the blurriness in the foreground and in the background. So yeah, that is the wrap for this tutorial. I hope you liked this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something new. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like and also subscribe to the channel. So yeah, thank you for watching this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.